All right, in this video we are talking about reading as a magical act. Relearning how to read in the digital age, because the way we tend to read nowadays is less effective than it used to be. Reading used to be considered a somewhat magical act. You've got these words on the page and they get stored on the shelf, and then somebody can just go to them and then extract the stories from them again uh, through code, right? And so it's very helpful to restore the magic to it. And I think a lot of people who watch this channel will tend to say that I am making magic merely psychology, or I'm merely pointing out scientific things. I'm not really pointing out magical things. I think that misses the point. The point is to basically restore the word magic to the things that have always been magical, that have been usurped by the scientists and the scholars, who now want to claim that it's something else. Okay, so many of the things that we think are quite ordinary are magical. And I think many of you are discovering that, this channel has a tendency to restore some enchantment back to the world, or at least I would hope so. So can initiation into the depths of magic happen just through reading? So many people who write occult books or who give occult lectures are very fond of saying that, well, you can't get it from a book. You gotta get it from me. I'm a teacher, right? Or you gotta get it from somebody who's a qualified teacher. Well, maybe they're protecting their business, so you can pay them temple dues, and then you have to go through them in order to get the instruction. Okay, to say that you can't initiate yourself through reading can be a bit suspect. Okay, I mean, granted, many people try to become, wiser and enlightened, and discover the hidden meaning in the depths of the universe through reading, and they don't succeed. No doubt. Okay, and of course what happens is they get into reading and then they go down these paths of reading that are like, thriller mysteries or comedy or something like that, and they allow themselves to become distracted by the same stuff that distracts them in their daily waking worlds. So let's propose for a moment that self-initiation can happen through reading. If it can, then reading needs to be restored to a magical act, and the way that we do it might need to change. And if we are to suppose that it's possible to initiate yourself through reading, then we have to confront one of the problems of the modern age, especially now, and that is the information bias. Okay, so to believe that learning is merely the act of acquiring information. Now, anybody who works in education and anybody who's been through education will know that's not true, that learning is a transformational process. It involves changing. It's kind of an initiation process. And yet we can't seem to break out of the perception that learning is simply a matter of acquiring information and downloading it into our head right off of the screen, right? Or just right off of the page. The information flies off off of the page into my head. I now know it. I can even recite it, and therefore I have learned. So something else has to happen for true learning to happen. Learning is a transformational process, and if we want to restore that transformation to the learning process, we have to see beyond the information bias. Okay. Now, in the modern age, the habit of searching the internet and then scanning for some piece of information this has made it even worse, because now we think, oh, I'm looking for something. Oh, I found the fact I'm looking for. Thank you very much. It's a street address or something like that, or a view of a business, and suddenly we're off and running. I got what I needed. So now our habit with reading is to simply regard it as that. I am looking for information. I found it. I'm retrieving it. I'm storing it in my brain, and now I go off and do something. Okay, it merely becomes an act of mind and matter, and that's it. There's nothing else apparently going on. So if we want to restore the magic of reading, there are some things available to us already that aren't necessarily occult in nature. They're right out there in the religious world and in the college world. Lectio Divina, I should have put that in italics because it's Latin. Lectio Divina means divine reading. It's a way of reading the Bible uh, that can extract divine messages from God out of it. It's a way of reading the Bible that allows you to communicate with God, or perhaps even the saints. Okay, sounds a bit heretical actually, because when you look Lectio Divina up online and get the instructions in how to do it, it kind of is enticing you to try to establish communication with God directly without going through your priest or without going through the church, which used to be considered heretical. Okay, which makes it much more interesting, doesn't it, when it becomes heretical? And then in the college world, we have something called close reading. Usually, close reading involves reading something first, like you would normally, to absorb the effect of it, and then reading it again very closely because you're looking for something. You're extracting various bits from it, and you might already have an idea of what you're looking for because you've read it once and you think you know what's going on, and so you go back and you're looking for certain things. Okay, and close reading has a number of techniques in it as well. Okay, and it requires some training to do because there's rhetorical analysis, there's literary analysis. These are techniques that we learn in the college world, maybe a little bit in high school. So these things are invaluable to the magician as well, to the occultist. These kinds of reading, and especially the kind you would learn in college. Okay. The interesting thing is that many of the things that we have available to us as magicians, we have learned in school, but these things, these various skills, have been subverted towards other objectives in the modern world, okay? And as magicians, we reclaim them and harness them towards the process of enlightenment and self-empowerment, things like that, okay? It's kind of an interesting idea too, because many of the things that I present on this channel are quite ordinary. I'm simply repurposing them towards a tantric path or towards a path of Western Tantra or Western initiation in the system of the Golden Dawn or in Hermetic magic, right? Theurgy. So before we look at how to do reading in a magical way, how to read like a sorcerer, right? We need to restore something to our outlook, okay? The modern human being tends to look at the world in terms of spirit and matter only, okay? Or mind and body. There's talk about the mind-body split or the mind-body connection, right? And so when this is what causes the problem with the information bias. Simply all I need is the information that's encoded, and if I can download into my head verbatim, now I know it, and it's stored in my material memory banks, and now I go off and do physical things with that knowledge, and I get lots of reward in terms of paychecks and things like that. I go get more knowledge downloaded into my brain, and then I use that knowledge to get physical things again. The entire world of the soul is left out of it. Okay, so when I say spirit, you could say mind. Okay, and body is matter and physical things, right? The soul is the level of the imagination. Okay, and in the modern world, one of the mental illnesses that we suffer from is that we believe that imagination is not real. It's not real. That was merely imaginary. Okay? In magic, something imaginary is not really imaginary. It'd be better to refer to it as imaginal. It's imaginal. It exists in the imagination. That dream you had last night, well, that didn't really happen. It was just a dream, right? Of course it happened. Was it real? Yes. As a dream, it was real. Okay. Is the wizard Gandalf a real person? No, he's not an actual person. Is he real? Yes, he is. As a fictional character, he is quite real. Okay. Is he powerful as a fictional character? Yes. He has changed many people's lives and he continues to do so. The imagination has its own level of reality. When we acknowledge this, then we know what to do, or we begin to know what to do when we attempt to restore reading back to the way it was, or back to the way it should be, as a transformational process of initiation. So reading can't even become a discipline. And of course, as many of you are discovering, when you take up a discipline or a curriculum, such as you will find in the Kabbalah Magic book, there's some required reading. It's kind of like being in school, right? At the School of Magic, right? And there's reading required. Uh-oh. And of course, you have to get it done before you can move on to the next grade. And you have to establish a discipline, like, well, I will read several pages every night at least, something like that, right? Or every morning. Okay, and as we attempt to do this, as we attempt to establish a reading discipline to get some reading done every day, we encounter reader's block. You may have heard of writer's block. There are barriers that keep people from sitting down to write. Writing can be a painful process. Okay, and reading can be similar. It's not as difficult as writer's block, but it is difficult, especially when we have modern technology that is constantly pulling us away from the act of true reading. Surfing Instagram is not the kind of reading that I'm trying to restore to you here, okay? Or scrolling through YouTube's. Right. So, or watching YouTube videos where everything is kind of imagined for you, okay? The idea is that when you sit down to read, that you enter imagination. And there's a reason why you have books and books and books lining the shelves of the occult bookstore that have no pictures in them, just words and maybe a few diagrams, because it's not up to the author to fully imagine things for you. It's up to you. And that's where the magic is, okay? So if you read a book and go through that as a transformational process, it's deeply ingrained because you had to imagine it very much on your own terms, as best you could, okay? If you watch a movie, it's all been imagined for you. It still can be powerful, very transformational, but there's a difference, okay? It's out there. It hasn't really sunk in because it hasn't required you to make something out of it. Okay, so the very act of you participating in the imaginal process of the author's writing, this is what begins to make it a magical transformational thing for you, okay? Because you are now involved, okay? I'm not saying that going to see a movie isn't magical. That is too, definitely. I'm watching a very powerful drama right now, actually, on TV. Um, uh, the key to restoring reading to its magical nature again is your ability to enter imagination. Okay, and we have something called basically reader's block, or just getting over the hump. Okay, so what you'll find is you'll sit down to read, let's say in the evening or in the morning, or your designated time to read, and you reach for your smartphone and start scrolling through something like Instagram or YouTube or something like that, right? Because it's so much easier to have things imagined for you. Plus, you're in control, sort of, right? And there's something about just looking at words on the page that requires more energy and more participation. Okay, and there's something in us that doesn't really want to muster that energy or do that creative participation. It's just the hump to get over. The interesting thing is, though, you resist the temptation. You put the phone away. You pick up the book, nothing but words, right? And you begin to read, and then suddenly you're in, and it's like, wow, I'm off. I'm off and running now, and this is really rewarding. This is good. Now I'm starting to unpack things, and now the process is going. Why was it so difficult to start? Wow. The main challenge of sitting down to read every day is simply starting. Okay. Same thing goes for writer's block. Writer's block, once you sit down to write, if you get going, then suddenly, very often, you can't stop. Okay. And reading is even a better example of that. Okay. So if you have trouble sitting down to read, you might want to remind yourself that just getting over that hump or getting over the threshold and into the imagination, that's the only real challenge there. And you might even see that there's that threshold of plunging into the imagination, into the imaginal world, right? And what is it that's keeping you from doing that? There's almost like a dweller on the threshold, isn't there? Who's kind of a guardian. So even in the process of reading, there's a guardian at the gate already keeping you out of that transformational process. And there's something required of you to bypass that guardian. Some extra energy, some kind of commitment, some kind of participation, okay, a level of awareness and willingness to create and to play along. Yeah. Okay, so that's not enough, though, I don't think. And so what I want to point out to you then is when you're diving into imagination, there are actually three levels of it, at least three levels of imagination. Okay, and if you are aware of what level of imagination you're functioning at, it can help you dive in and start playing with it in a way that's going to really be now transformative, hopefully. Okay, so let's dive into the different levels of imagination. And you can even look at this and you can say, well, which levels am I really good at here? Okay. All right. Let's say you're reading something, well, you're reading a book, okay? And so it's as if the author is standing at a podium or something like that and reading to the audience, and you are in the audience, okay? So when you begin to pluck the words off the page or sound them out, you are imagining the author speaking, okay? Because you're decoding phonetic symbols on the page. And in order to move deeper into the imagination, you first have to hear the author's voice in your head, okay? Reading is an auditory process. One of the mistakes we make is that we think we can just go straight to the story. We can go straight to what the information is telling us. We can't. There's the first level of imagination is actually hearing the voice of the author, okay? And if reading is a challenge for you, sometimes it's because you're not doing that and you need to slow down and then hear this person talking. In fact, what do they sound like? Do they sound like a lecturer at a podium? Do they sound like they're sitting down by the campfire telling a ghost story? Do they sound conspiratorial, like a friend who's tapped you on the shoulder? Psst. Okay, what's the tone? Okay, what do they sound like? And of course, if you have trouble, imagining the author's voice, you can read it out loud as them to try to mimic what they might sound like. And if you're in an environment where you have to be quiet, you can just mouth the words. That will help you imagine what's being said as well. Okay, but of course, it pays to sort of work the imagination like a muscle to get better and better at imagining that voice. Okay. Level two of imagination, as you can see, the audience not only is listening to the person speak. Okay, so you're not only imagining that you're listening to the person speak at the podium, you are now beginning to imagine what that person is describing. Level two. So what they are literally describing is some kind of story, let's say, right? Here it's a story of Perseus cutting off Medusa's head. And so we are literally visualizing what the author is describing the story, okay, as it comes out. Okay. And this is where it starts to become very much like astral projection. You pretty much are now in the story, and these scenes are unfolding before your eyes, and the action's happening, and you imagine what it feels like to be these characters, etc., right? And then there's level three. Level three is where you're capable of analyzing the story or whatever it is that's being presented into its parts. Okay, you're able to diagram it in various ways, many different ways, to figure out how it works. Okay, so you might even say if somebody is doing a ritual or casting a spell, um, then there's the incantation part of it, but then there's the visualization of what they're describing, which is pretty wild, right? But then also there's the methodology and the rhythm of it and the moving from scene to scene of it that has its sequential formula that brings you through a process, an initiation process, a transformation process. Okay. You can't just have somebody cutting off Medusa's head and walking away. No, there's a whole story there, and the story itself is capable of bringing about profound transformation. And of course, in order to experience this, it helps to then learn how to function on all three levels. Okay. For many of us, I think it involves remembering that reading is a process of auditory imagination. So we imagine the author speaking. We have to start doing that again. That means slowing down and allowing that voice to come out and speak as it wants to, as it suggests it sounds. Okay. And then of course, diving into imagination and taking time, even to put the book down and fully visualize what was just described. Then look again and keep going, fully processing. I don't know what to say processing, fully visualizing and fully immersing yourself in that imagery as it unfolds. Okay. What does it feel like to be these people in the story? Ouch. And then, of course, then to experience the structure of the story as well, the rhythm and the flow, the incantational quality of it, the transformational beginning to end process, the invocation aspects of it, what themes are being called in to now work their magic upon me as I experience all the stuff happening in the story. Very magical. Okay. All right. So in order to appreciate how this works, it really would be very helpful for all students of magic to take a course in literature, maybe take 2 courses in literature. Very easy to do. You can do it online for free. There are websites like Coursera where you can take courses in this for free. And I learned the various devices that are used in literature. And this is, lo and behold, these are magical things. Symbolism, symbols, magical symbols, metaphors, foreshadowing. Okay, foreshadowing is like divination. It's like predicting the future, reading the future through signs and portents. Foreshadowing. Okay, uh, similes, metaphors. Okay, of course, drama, suspense. These are all magical things, and they have a transformational impact on you You can experience things in imagination, which can bring you to a higher level of awareness. And the nice thing about doing that in your reading is you can experience them in the imagination without having to suffer terribly like the people in the story are suffering. You can experience that cathartically. And so the nice thing is what you begin to learn is that, oh my gosh, I can process my karma in the imagination. I don't have to wait for it to come out into the physical world and beat me over the head and give me a harsh life. I can process it internally before it reaches outward manifestation to give me hell. This is true magic. Okay, and many people sort of instinctively know this, and that's why they read high quality literature so that they can process all this really dark, scary stuff, so that it doesn't come out into their lives and wreak havoc. Okay, to some degree. So, and that's what magic largely is too. You learn to purify a lot of this karma before it can manifest, and you begin to sort of lead a charmed life. Okay, no guarantees. We still face challenges in life, but you might notice that people who are really truly doing magic, they have it pretty easy. Okay, if they're not doing magic correctly, um, they get beaten up by life pretty badly. Okay, because magic will prod things out to be dealt with, and if you don't deal with them properly on the imagination, then they'll come out into the manifest into manifestation, and then trouble you there. Okay, so that's one of the reasons magic has a bad reputation, because if you don't do it right, it does cause bad things to happen. One of the things about the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, as many of you are discovering, is that it inflates the ego. That's what it does. It's not an unfortunate thing. Oh my God, like so many people are getting ego inflated by magic. It's like lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram inflates egos. That's what it does. It prods our demons to the surface to trouble us some more, but they trouble us really in the realm of imagination where we can deal with them before they become major hassles in our life. Okay. If we fail to do that, then all that's happening is that we become affronted by them, offended by them, and we get puffed up against everything around us. Okay, that's how it works. Okay, um, and you can see that the ability to confront various imaginal entities like that. That's what happens when we read, especially when we read super high quality literature. Okay, so it's a process known as catharsis. We are purifying the soul, making it clearer so we can live more magically. And of course, literary devices that we learn all those things like similes, metaphors, foreshadowing, uh, those kinds of things, personification, anthropomorphism. Um, of course, there are rhetorical devices, which are pretty much the same, but of course, rhetorical devices apply to nonfiction more, I guess. And rhetorical devices also apply to the spoken word auditorily, like during speeches. Okay. And so you can analyze what you're reading or what you're hearing in terms of the rhetorical devices that people use. Like if you're listening to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, you could um, analyze that not only for the content and the techniques used in the written speech, you could also analyze it for the vocal inflections and the power of the voice, how the voice is used to the cadence of it, okay, and the rising and the falling, how does it work to stir the audience? Why should we do literary analysis? Why should we learn that? Isn't it enough to just go through and read these stories? Well, if you want to be a magician, you have to learn how magic works. Okay, so you got to learn all these little tricks that writers use, and writers and speakers use, okay, in order to stir the audience and change the world. This is magic. Okay, the ability to speak in an incantational sort of way to change people's lives, your own life, mostly. Why would we want to learn literary analysis or rhetorical analysis. Okay, there are two reasons, so that you can learn how to do it too. So you read this great work of literature and you say, wow, that's powerful. So you analyze it to figure out how it works, and then you figure out, oh, I can do that too. Now that I see the pieces that are being so effectively utilized, I can see the literary devices that are being used. I could do that. Yeah, now that I see how it works. And also for rhetorical analysis, same thing. So you can see how the various rhetorical tricks work when somebody's giving a very stirring speech, okay, or has written a very powerful essay. How is it that that essay is so powerful? You learn the tricks that the authors use to achieve those effects, okay? And some of these tricks are also underhanded in terms of propaganda, fallacies. You also learn them just to see how people can be tricked into believing something that isn't true. You learn how propaganda works, okay? And you learn how to use words and speaking as a form of mind control, okay? But of course, the second reason why we learn literary analysis and rhetorical analysis is so that that sort of mind control will not work on us. We will become immune to it. So there are two reasons to do literary analysis and rhetorical analysis, is that so that we can do it too. It's almost like casting spells on people, right? But also so that we become immune to it. We will notice when somebody's using the same tricks on us. Okay. Now, that might take a little bit of the magic out of what they do to us, but we still have a choice as to whether we fall under the spell of that person. We can still say, just play along and go, wow, this is awesome. Like, so, okay, so to be a good magician involves learning what many of you have probably thought to be quite ordinary, mundane knowledge. What's a symbol? What's a metaphor? What is foreshadowing? Okay, what is imagery? And how is it being used effectively? These are essentially what magic is. And what you'll find is that in the great works of literature, there are many leveling up experiences presented. Not many people who do literary analysis recognize them. You have to be more of a magician to see it, or more of a sorcerer or a shaman. But you'll notice that many characters face opportunities to level up, like in other words, to be transformed and emerge in a new level of understanding. And if very often they succeed, and we see how they did it, but they also fail, and we also learn why they failed, how they failed, what was the problem. That's also a lesson. Okay, so there are many. And yeah, you guys might want to contact me too in the comments, and you might say, well, which literature should I read to see some of these opportunities to level up? Okay, in other words, in the great works of literature, there are many initiatory experiences presented that the protagonist may or may not succeed at passing to emerge on a new level of consciousness. Okay. Does this render magic ordinary and just bring it down to the level of literature? No. It restores literature to the level of magic because it has always been magical. Okay, and many things out in the world are quite magical when you learn how to repurpose them towards self-initiation. And so in this regard, yes, it is possible to initiate yourself via reading alone, without doing fancy rituals and dressing up and using daggers and magic wands and cups, right? Yes, it's possible, and it has happened. Will you succeed if you try to do that? Probably not, but of course, most people will not succeed even when they do all the fancy rituals and stuff like that too, because uh, it requires expertise and guidance usually. Can you succeed without a teacher? Yes, you can. Okay, with the Kabbalah magic work, most people will probably not succeed in doing it. There's possibility of that. the most important thing is to stick to the work just as it's described. If you want to make changes to it, you can contact me and I might be able to help, but I'm not going to be your, teacher holding your hand every step of the way. Right? So yes, I already answered this question. Can initiation happen through books? Yes, but it is unlikely. What you will catch from when, if you see, if you read really high quality literature, let's say, or really high quality essays, you'll feel that brush with something like an opportunity to emerge at a new level of awareness. You'll catch a brush with it, like it passed you by, and it's like, what was that? But it'll leave you pretty much where you are and might make you feel bereft. Like it's like I know what that is. I'm going to go after it, and maybe someday I'll get it. Someday I'll get to that new level. Okay. But of course, if you learn how to do rhetorical analysis and literary analysis, you can begin to see what's happening better and better. Okay. And of course, doing work with theurgy or ceremonial magic, you are really directly hardcore working with this type of imagery in a formulaic way. Okay. Uh, what I recommend is that when you do ceremonial magic, a curriculum in ceremonial magic, and study mythology and literature and rhetorical analysis as part of your work. All right. Hope that's clear. I think this was a shorter video than they usually are. Thank God, right? All right, so until next time.